that the producers, far left-wing activists in Hollywood, are turning on her, and Disney has canceled all of Rachel Zegler's appearances on their media platforms. Kind of tough.
And there is no resolution in sight for the Walt Disney Company when it comes to Snow White 2025 at the box office. This is exactly why Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, is in pure panic mode over not just the Rachel Zgler backlash, but the entire backlash surrounding this movie in general.
They say Disney wants to find the very essence of fairy tales. But in recent years, something has shifted. The House of Mouse, the studio that gave us enchanting princesses and magical kingdoms, found itself in the eye of a storm over one of its oldest classics, Snow White. When Disney first announced a modern retelling featuring rising actress Rachel Zgler, fans expected a charming tribute to a story that has existed in popular culture for generations. Instead, they got a wave of backlash so powerful that even Disney's most loyal critics were stunned.
There are empty theaters all around the country. We are now at a 1 out of 10 on IMDb for the new Snow White.
But what really happened behind the scenes? Why did a movie with so much hype suddenly become Disney's biggest fiasco in years? And how did Rachel Zgler go from an emerging sensation to a lightning rod for controversy that nearly cost Disney its fairy tale reputation? When Disney first unveiled its plans for a live-action Snow White, executives believed they had a surefire recipe for success. They had already reimagined other classics, like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, with mixed but still profitable results. The plan was simple: keep enough of the original storyline to spark nostalgia, but infuse the film with contemporary themes designed to resonate with today's audiences. They picked Rachel Zgler, known for her breakout role in West Side Story, as the new face of the legendary princess. Early internal memos described her as fresh, confident, and socially conscious, precisely the qualities Disney executives wanted to highlight.
So she just encapsulates everything that most of us cannot stand about modern-day feminism and the left in general, and Hollywood.
Almost instantly, though, whispers of discontent spread through online fan forums. Some felt that a radical overhaul of the 1937 film would be a step too far. Devoted fans cherished the idea of a wide-eyed princess who brought cheer to forest creatures and dwarfs alike. The new version, by contrast, seemed determined to prove it was nothing like the original. Zgler's interviews didn't help matters. She openly criticized the notion that the prince should swoop in to save Snow White, suggesting that the classic fairy tale was outdated and irrelevant.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time. It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about
she's gonna die.
true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can.
While Disney's marketing team believed this modern spin would excite progressive-minded viewers, many fans felt it came across as disrespectful. But that wasn't the entire story. As soon as promotional materials trickled out, fans noticed other stark changes. Early set photos hinted at dwarfs replaced with CGI creatures. Rumors swirled that Snow White's innocence was being swapped for a bold feminist edge. The idea might have worked if the film could seamlessly blend tradition and innovation. But from the outset, the narrative felt disjointed, sending up a red flag that Disney might be rewriting more than just the happily ever after ending.
Things like on Instagram, like, thank you so much for making this the #1 movie in the world, guys. And well, this time around with the second weekend, her approach is completely different, okay?
The real trouble began when Rachel Zgler made a series of statements that sent shockwaves through social media. In one interview, she joked about the prince being creepy and how the original film was so old-fashioned it's weird. Fans who had grown up adoring the 1937 classic saw her remarks as dismissive. Suddenly, hashtags condemning the remake spread like wildfire on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Even some Disney-friendly critics, famous for giving the studio the benefit of the doubt, started to question the direction of the film.
And just how once trusted critics that shilled for the Disney company all the time, even they are beginning to turn their back against them. That's how bad this movie truly is. Even if you look at the IMDb rating score, that's when you really know how terrible this movie is and how it really hit rock bottom.
Zgler's public persona also shifted. Once perceived as a bright-eyed newcomer grateful for every opportunity, she now came off as somewhat condescending, lecturing potential viewers on the need to update old stories. Video clips of her interviews circulated, racking up millions of views for all the wrong reasons. People scrutinized her every word, turning her remarks into memes and sound bites that painted her as ungrateful for a role that countless actresses would have dreamed of.
That despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them,
she's a good actress,
that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
wow.
Disney's social media team scrambled to do damage control. They released carefully worded statements emphasizing creative freedom and innovation, but it was too late. The online fury had already ignited. Regular updates about the film stalled, and fans began suspecting internal chaos. Each day brought a fresh wave of criticism, pushing Disney to find a new angle before the entire project crumbled under the weight of bad publicity. Behind closed doors, Disney executives felt the strain. Early test screenings had offered lukewarm responses, but nobody expected the blowback to reach such a boiling point. A leaked marketing memo allegedly described the campaign as fractured, pointing out a lack of cohesive messaging. While some promotional efforts tried to celebrate the magic of Snow White, others pushed a complete reinvention, confusing the public about what exactly this movie was supposed to be. The negative trailer reception hammered the final nail into the coffin. The moment it debuted, YouTube comment sections exploded with people criticizing everything from the dialogue to the costume designs. Classic fans weren't just unimpressed, they felt betrayed. This clamor made Disney question its entire approach. Executives had gambled on the idea that a fresh perspective would attract modern audiences, but they realized it was turning off longtime supporters, the very people who had cherished Disney's oldest masterpiece. Soon, whispers about a drastic measure began circulating. Would Disney dare reboot the film before it even had a chance to premiere? At first, that idea sounded ridiculous. Yet, as the weeks dragged on and the backlash refused to die, it became increasingly clear that the damage might be too severe to salvage with simple PR fixes. Something radical had to happen, or Disney risked tarnishing one of its foundational legacies. While the corporate world behind Snow White tried to patch the sinking ship, Rachel Zgler found herself under scrutiny unlike anything she'd experienced before. Far from the days when she was just the bright star of an acclaimed musical, she was now labeled as a polarizing figure who had insulted Disney's own tradition. Internal rumors suggested that some of her scheduled appearances on Disney-owned media platforms were quietly canceled, presumably to reduce further negative headlines. Zgler, for her part, went mostly silent. People wondered if her brief remarks apologizing or claiming her words were taken out of context might have saved the situation.
She's now bragging about the success of Snow White, which is a movie that's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, and mainly because of her and because nobody wanted to support her.
But every new interview snippet ended up fueling more outrage. Critics argued that she should have shown more respect for the story that launched the Disney empire, while her defenders insisted she was just standing up for a modern viewpoint.
You could look at the fact that she has been sabotaging this film for years at this point, all in this sort of pursuit of entitlement.
Regardless, public opinion had tilted against her. As the backlash peaked, even Hollywood insiders who had once praised her potential seemed to step back.
People have real problems and no one gives a if she got paid for 17 instead of 18 on her multi-million-dollar salary, which is not calculated by the hour.
Some began to question whether her association with a production this controversial would hurt her future casting opportunities. One thing was certain, no matter how Disney tried to spin it, Rachel Zgler's involvement had become a symbol of the project's failure to connect with core fans. And for a brand as image-conscious as Disney, that was enough to consider a clean break.
Tell me if this is attractive to you. Like, does this, imagine you invested into her being the face of the movie and she's the main character and she's trying to promote the movie. Would this make you want to go watch the movie when she's starring in it and she's the main character?
In an unprecedented move, Disney announced it would develop another Snow White remake just as Zegler's version was wrapping its post-production. For many observers, this felt like the studio was admitting defeat before the movie even premiered.
Disney responded by scaling back the premiere. I don't know that anyone really showed up to the premiere. The Rotten Tomatoes reviews are looking pretty bad, and they did, it seems like they tried to tweak a few things, but this movie is bad.
The new film, slated for 2027, promised a return to the classic spirit of the original 1937 animation, restoring beloved songs, iconic visuals, and the sense of wonder that had captivated audiences for generations. Internally, this was described as a course correction, a term rarely used in public-facing press releases. It signaled that Disney recognized it had veered off track. By announcing a new project so soon, the company aimed to reassure fans that the legacy of Snow White was not being replaced, but rather reaffirmed. Anonymous sources within Disney hinted at the intense debates leading up to this decision. Some executives wanted to wait and see how Zegler's version performed at the box office, but others felt the brand damage was already too significant. The news made headlines everywhere. Commentators and fans had a field day on social media, calling it everything from corporate desperation to a necessary pivot. Yet, among the jokes and skepticism, there was a glimmer of hope. People who had loved Snow White in its original form began to believe that maybe Disney would finally deliver an adaptation worthy of its name.
And you have parents looking at Disney being like, what are you doing, guys? This is supposed to be a place where magic happens, and all you're doing is indoctrinating kids, and you're having this person be the poster child of the Democratic Party.
If done right, this new remake could be the redemption arc both Disney and its fans desperately needed. Moving forward, Disney took a radically different approach. First, they assured everyone that the next adaptation would closely track the core elements of the 1937 masterpiece. That meant the classic dwarfs, the forest animals, and the enchanting musical numbers were all back in full force.
We'll still offend the dwarves, but we'll CGI dwarves. So we'll guarantee no employment for little people while getting rid of this other component that warranted CGI. It was the worst decision they could possibly make.
More importantly, the studio made it clear that any updates would serve the story's heart rather than overshadow it. Gone were the sweeping proclamations about dismantling fairy tale tropes. In their place, Disney emphasized a humble respect for what made Snow White iconic in the first place. Industry insiders revealed that the studio was determined to avoid a repeat of the previous media fiasco. Stricter media training for cast members would be a top priority. The plan was to ensure every interview, promotional event, and social media post consistently honored the film's spirit. Rather than attacking or dismissing the original, Disney would celebrate it, even while adding gentle tweaks to engage modern viewers. Simultaneously, a new team of writers, directors, and producers was assembled. Some were rumored to have backgrounds in both animation and live action, lending them a unique perspective on how to translate a cherished cartoon classic into a modern film. Others had experience crafting emotionally resonant stories that appealed to a wide range of ages, something the previous version seemed to struggle with. Word of mouth suggested that Disney was putting extra resources behind this effort, allocating a larger budget for top-tier animators and composers to capture the timeless ambiance fans had craved. Amid all these creative plans, Disney also had to grapple with the cold, hard numbers. Merchandise associated with Zegler's Snow White had underperformed miserably. Retailers who had once been thrilled to stock Snow White dolls and costumes began slashing prices in an attempt to clear out products nobody wanted. Reports indicated that Disney's consumer products division was left with warehouses of unsold items, creating a financial hit that went beyond the film itself.
She destroyed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of IP for Disney, but she also has destroyed her career and the careers of anybody who worked on the movie.
Analysts pointed out that Disney's losses weren't just about one failed movie. Every time a live-action remake flopped, the brand took another dent, making it harder to sell theme park tickets, home media, and streaming subscriptions. Snow White was particularly pivotal because it was the film that started the entire Disney animation empire back in 1937. If the company couldn't preserve the magic of that story, critics argued, what hope was there for the rest of the Disney catalog? Faced with growing doubt from investors and fans, Disney knew this new reboot had to be more than profitable. It had to be a statement. That's why the stakes soared. If the upcoming Snow White could restore public confidence, Disney might reclaim its throne as the undisputed king of fairy tales. But another misstep could push the company into a deeper identity crisis, leaving people to wonder whether the era of classic Disney enchantment had finally come to an end. Despite the lingering skepticism, some fans expressed genuine excitement at the idea of a faithful return to Snow White's roots. Online forums lit up with people reminiscing about childhood memories of the original film, whether it was the breathtaking moment when Snow White meets the forest creatures, or the iconic scene where she sings, "Someday my prince will come." There was a collective yearning for that kind of cinematic wonder, a feeling many believed Disney had lost while chasing modern reinventions. Disney capitalized on this nostalgia by floating rumors of cameo appearances, legacy animator involvement, and even references to behind-the-scenes artistry from the 1930s. Eager to show they had learned from past mistakes, the studio teased that the new film would pay homage to the designs, pacing, and musical style that had made the original a timeless masterpiece. Instead of overshadowing Snow White's innocence, the creative team aimed to deepen her character in a way that felt both classic and subtly updated. At the same time, the online community found itself divided between wait-and-see realists and Disney loyalists, who were already sold on the idea. Some had doubts, pointing out that big corporations rarely admit their errors so openly. Still, the company's humility in acknowledging it had strayed from the path did resonate. Perhaps the biggest shift was the noticeable absence of any direct condemnation of the older remake or of Rachel Zgler herself. Disney, it seemed, wanted to move forward without dragging the past version through the mud, even though the new approach was a clear repudiation of everything that project had stood for. Now, the question hanging in the air is whether Disney can deliver on its promise to bring back the enchantment that first bewitched audiences in 1937. The stakes couldn't be higher. One misstep could reinforce the view that the magic is gone for good, while a triumphant release might propel Disney into a new golden age of adaptations, ones that update rather than upend their beloved source material. If there's a lesson to be learned from the Rachel Zgler controversy, it's that fans are fiercely protective of the stories they grew up with. Modernizing a classic isn't necessarily a bad idea. Many welcomed the notion of giving Snow White more depth, agency, and relatability. The real problem came when the new vision seemed to look down on what made the original so special in the first place.
Look no further than what Disney is doing with their woke, DEI, feminist agenda.
By suggesting the original was weird, stalkerish, or old-fashioned, Disney appeared to alienate the very people who had embraced Snow White for decades. Moving on from that fiasco won't be easy, but the studio has already shown it's willing to acknowledge its mistakes by announcing a second reboot. The hope is that they'll take the best aspects of the 1937 film, its heart, music, and timeless themes, and meld them with tasteful updates that respect the original's legacy. A well-chosen cast, meticulously crafted marketing strategy, and thoughtful homage to Walt Disney's early vision could all combine to reignite the spark that made Snow White legendary. So, can Disney save its oldest princess from the brink of irrelevance? Will audiences flock back to theaters if the trailers showcase an endearing, nostalgic fairy tale? And will the new leading actress, the one tasked with filling Snow White's iconic shoes, honor the story rather than tear it down? The answers to these questions will determine more than just the fate of a single movie. They'll define whether Disney can still be trusted to tell timeless stories, or if the age of enchanting princess classics is slowly fading away. In the meantime, fans worldwide wait with bated breath, torn between lingering doubts and the desire to believe in the magic once more. After all, Snow White was the film that started it all, paving the way for every Disney princess that followed. If any story deserves a second chance, it's the one that first captured the world's imagination nearly a century ago. And maybe, just maybe, if Disney has learned the right lessons from this turbulent chapter, the next time the words, "Once upon a time," echo through a darkened theater, we'll all remember why we loved fairy tales in the first place. For now, though, the spotlight remains on Disney's every move. The corporate giant stands at a crossroads between the nostalgic charm of tradition and the forward march of modern storytelling. By promising a renewed Snow White, they've set a high bar that must be met if they hope to regain fans' trust. Though the controversies, the setbacks, and the misaligned priorities have cast a cloud over the project, there's a glimmer of anticipation that perhaps, beneath the